It was a regular day, and Yomi was outside of town in the forest to practice with her scythe into improving her skills. She had been practiced for nearly about 2 hours by slicing some logs and some rocks she found, and she had managed to improve much of her skills. But she still wanted to get some more training because she wanted to be better than she was before. But while she was training, she heard a strange sound in the sky. She looked up and saw this strange looking plane somehow crash down with the forest and heard this loud crash sound in the distance. At first, she didn't want to thought much about it, so she didn't pay some attention. But after nearly only a few seconds, even it felt like an hour passed, she walked up to the site where she heard what this crashing had. There, she was expected to find some wreckage of a plane, but in fact, she didn't even find a plane. No wreckage at all, except in the crash hole, she found a robot. A very strange looking robot. She never expected or even ever seen anything like it. She didn't walk up much closer, only stepped away for only for a short distance. But this robot apparently saw her and stood up and demanded to know who she is and why he's there and where he is. She then only said that her name was Yumi and that he was there to do some training and that he was in the forest somewhere in Japan. And that made him seriously angry. He had no idea that happened. And even though that he saw that she had a scythe, he didn't feel threatened though, because he directed a sort of laser cannon against her, and she said, "Don't fire, or I will slice your arm off." And he laughed at her and said, "Oh, your scythe cannot hurt me." But then she saw a tree just only next to her, and she used a scythe only one strike, and the tree fell to the ground. But that was not nothing, he said. "Can you cast something much harder and a tree?" And then she saw this a small signs of a rock nearby, and then she sliced it twice, and he was a bit surprised that she managed to slice through at least a solid rock. He then asked her why she was using that weapon. She told him this was her special skilled weapon, and she was out in for training her more stronger. And she demanded to know what his name was, and he said that his name was Dirge. She even asked what he was and where he's from. He told her that he's a Decepticon from the planet Cybertron, but has been living in America for the past few years. And of course, she didn't even mention that she had never heard about Cybertron or even a Decepticon. She wanted to know more, but Dirge wasn't much up to much talking. So after that, their short brief, he took off in the air and just left. Of course, Yumi could not much think of much about it afterwards. After he just disappeared, she just left the forest and went back to town to do something else. She didn't mention about this encounter to some of her friends or others for the next couple of weeks, actually. She didn't even see Dirge after that. She didn't even see him again. After that, a few weeks, she forgot about her encounter with Dirge. But another day, a few weeks later, when she was in the forest again for some training, she actually came across the same site where she found Dirge. But there were no trace about him. It was like he has never been there in a long time. Dirge, however, he was actually very much close by, and actually was absorbed was actually watching her from a short distance. He saw her training and he was somehow impressed of her skills. She did remind her and remind him about some Decepticons back home. But she did see him, but didn't care much about him though. Because she continued to training, take a break, and training is more. But as she was walking back to the town, he walked up to her, asked her, like not demanding but more as questioned, why she was training it so much when she was already skilled enough with design. She said to him she wanted to be more skilled. She wanted to know more about him though. But he didn't speak much either about his past or how he ended up in Japan in the first place, except saying that he was in a battle against an enemy and then suddenly he was in Japan. After that, he was drawn into this space bridge. She had never heard space bridge, and she requested to know more. But he said if she wanted to know more, she will have to go find him in the old factory just outside of town. So she was had to do so because he didn't want to be spotted by anyone else in town, of anyone from towns, of course. So for the next couple of days, she was waiting what eat. She was at her own place, just thinking if she ever would go back to this factory to know more about Dirge. But her her curiosity took much of her, and she decided to go see him just to know more. Because the more information she had about him, perhaps she was able to maybe to figure out if he was a threat to her or the city. So when she was at the factory, he was just sitting there watching some TV that he had found. Apparently, he wanted to know more about this country and he even just slacking around in the factory. He doesn't do much. As they were talking, she literally found out more. It turned out during the fight against this enemy they called the Autobots that apparently the Autobots were strong fighters, but the Megatron, the leader of Decepticons, were very much was very much displeased about Dirge approaches. He was very disappointed about Dirge disobeying orders and other things that. But he had only one other chance of proving that his obedient, his loyalty to the Decepticons. Even Dirge wanted to be more just as a simple soldier. He wanted to be like a squad leader or something. But during the fight, Megatron actually pushed or smacked Dirge into the space bridge, which already was unstable. Hopefully, apparently, it was Dirge believed that he would be destroyed, so that he wouldn't have to be destroying himself. So after this, he didn't bother to send a broadcast signal to the other following Decepticons. But after seeing and even reading online about Decepticons or even Autobots, he searched all over the place for to find any trace about mentioning them, but apparently no luck at all. So after that, he decided to just abandon his search for other robots or anyone from Cybertron. But he didn't know if he would go back to Cybertron by himself. That was unlikely because he had no idea where the planet were located now, since the planet itself was going to be traveled through space, since there needed no star around it. But after that, his time with Yomi had started to get a little different. This was actually the beginning of a very strange friendship between them. Even though that Dirge was not much a fan of being having friends, only to have some comrades of being rely on. But after that, he has been seeing how much she'd been skilled in her scythe and other places and other things. They started to have this friendship, even if they were a little bit strange at first. Even though that Dirge used to be a bad guy, but with Yomi's help, or his own at least experience, he slowly started changing his personality into be more as a good guy. He had already been revealed himself in town several times, especially doing stop a bank robber and even helping run some disaster, even help a fires for forest fire had been happened. And he was really accepted by the people in town to be as a friend and he was an ally, almost a local hero. But at the same time, Yomi had fallen in love with Dirge, but she didn't tell him that because she was afraid how he would take it. But she did actually then at some point did mention to him about her feelings. And surprising to her, he actually liked her even the same way. When they were first start dating though, there were some points when they at least early in their relationship there was a very rocky points. Like they had some disagreements what to do and what the things to do and also and that even though Yomi was really curious, very scared or at least worried about this new relationship would fail with Dirge. But Dirge was actually proving that he wanted Willings was willing to make sure this dating process with Yomi would work. And they actually made it work all along. Even at first, Yomi was really surprising that her time with Dirge was even this working. Because one day when Yomi arrived at his place in the old factory, he wasn't even there. But he left her a message saying he was leaving town, but only for a short time because he wanted to do some exploring by himself, or at least he wanted some time by himself, which she was agreeing to let them to do. And he arrived back to town about a week later, which she had no problem with. And it happened that Yomi, at some point later on, moved in the factory with Dirge. Even some people from town had been at the factory and helped to rebuild it, or at least restore it to this better condition, since Yomi decided to live there with him. And of course, there were a lot of things that did happen. Some of their friends were a little bit still skeptical about this new relationship with Dirge. I mean, since she was really much a living being and that he was a robot, they were not much against this relationship at all. Just they didn't know if it was going to last particularly long because some of their friends had actually mentioned if they would get married and have a family and how that would work, since both of them are incapable of having a baby children together. But even though that Yomi wanted to have a family at some point, Dirge, by the way, he went away and had to end didn't know if he wanted to have a family of his own. But seeing how much Yomi wanted to have a family, and since they were only engaged after being together for about 4 years, Dirge and Yomi decided to have a small wedding. Only invited some close friends nearby on town, nearby temple in town. After they would get married, they had only about a few days of vacation or at least a honeymoon by traveling around the lake's coastline or something like that. But when they came back, they were just happy to be married. But there were some of their friends who was really still much very puzzled that they actually got married. And now even some of their friends Matsu by comment said, now it's time to get out of family and having some children together. Even though Yumi wasn't ready to be a mother at the moment, she didn't want to wait at least maybe a few years after she got married. Dirge agreed. So after nearly about 3 years, they actually got married. They actually adopted a daughter of their own now. And only 2 years later, they adopted a boy. There were some points in their lives when after they get married and having a family that they were will spending so much time with the children as much as possible as they could. Even if there were some parts in their children's growing up that they were a little bit scared having a robot as a father. But seeing how much he was was willing to give so much attention to his children, they actually started opening up. And of course, it took only about a few weeks or so, just a short time before they fully accepted, and their family life was actually very stable and very happy. Dirge often took his children on his arms and flew around the town of Bad City, and even that he always made sure that they were safe. And they loved it. Even at first they were a little bit scared, but after some time they loved to watch it from the city from the sky and even beyond that. Yomi at first, well, she was really a little bit skeptical about this particular idea. But after seeing how her kids was really so excited after the first few times, so she was well then luckily to be agreeing. And after she's seen the city from above herself, but after Dirge was carrying her, she agreed. And but they still had some few rules what to do and what not to do, which at first they were a little bit hard their kids to be followed. But after some discussions about what to do, the kids will start following around after the rules. For Yomi, this relationship with Dirge probably was one of the best in her life. She was excited to be married to someone that unusual, some unique. Even Dirge himself was not expecting to be married with another living creature or living being. Even learning that Yumi wasn't even a human being, that she was in fact an alien by the name Zachary. That didn't bother him that she was an alien too, because now they had something in common even more. Even though that he could not eat, he actually enjoyed cooking food for his family. So even that he didn't eat, he always sit down with the table and just enjoy the family company, like asking the other kids for how their day been and how Yumi's day have been, like some just chit chat. For Dirk though, he was really happy to be with Yomi and having a family with her. This was something that he never had expected to happen. His time with her just had been the best in his whole life. And this is how Yomi and Dirge found a true love got a family together. The end.